He is saying by the end of this decade, we will have AGI. So it seems like AI safety is on everybody's mind lately, and now that OpenAI basically dissolved all of their non-disparagement clauses with former employees, more people are coming out and talking about how worried they are. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So first I want to go over this letter at righttowarn.ai, and this is an open letter signed by multiple OpenAI current employees and former employees and other AI leaders talking about the state of AI and the state of AI safety. So we are current and former employees at frontier AI companies, and we believe in the potential of AI technology to deliver unprecedented benefits to humanity. We also understand the serious risks posed by these technologies. These risks range from the further entrenchment of existing inequalities to manipulation and misinformation. These two things are what I am most worried about. To the loss of control of autonomous AI systems, potentially resulting in human extinction. Very, very scary, but something that I don't believe is going to happen, and that's just my core belief. AI companies themselves have acknowledged these risks, as have governments across the world and other AI experts, and they give a bunch of references where they actually point out times where companies, governments, and AI experts have talked about the risks of AI. We are hopeful that these risks can be adequately mitigated with sufficient guidance from the scientific community, policymakers, and the public. However, AI companies have strong financial incentives to avoid effective oversight. And that's really what we're seeing today. A lot of people, including Ilya, who just left, including Jan, who just left as the head of AI super alignment at OpenAI, are basically saying companies are optimizing for increases in quality and other productization of AI instead of AI safety. And we do not believe bespoke structures of corporate governance are sufficient to change this. AI companies possess substantial non-public information about the capabilities and limitations of their systems, the adequacy of their protective measures, and the risk levels of different kinds of harm. However, they currently have only weak obligations to share some of this information with governments and none with civil society. Another reason to be very bullish and very proactive in the open source AI community, because if it's all out there, then we can talk about it, we can examine it, we can dive into the details together, and it just allows for a much more hardened AI infrastructure. We do not think they can all be relied upon to share it voluntarily. And so the letter goes on to talk about some of the confidentiality agreements put in place by OpenAI and other leading frontier AI companies. So long as there is no effective government oversight of these corporations, and it's tough to have government oversight without also having regulatory capture, because who within the government knows better about AI than the AI companies themselves? And so, of course, the government is going to lean on AI companies to inform their decisions. AI companies are incentivized to make it as difficult as possible for upstart AI companies to compete, because that is how incentives work. Current and former employees are among the few people who can hold them accountable to the public. Yet, broad confidentiality agreements block us from voicing our concerns, except to the very companies that may be failing to address these concerns. Ordinary whistleblower protections are insufficient because they focus on illegal activity, whereas many of the risks we are concerned about are not yet regulated. That is an interesting concept. So none of this stuff is illegal. Thus, they're not covered under whistleblower status. But who knows if they should actually be illegal or not, because this is all very new stuff. Some of us reasonably fear various forms of retaliation given the history of such cases across the industry. We therefore call upon advanced AI companies to commit to these principles: that the company will not enter into or enforce any agreement that prohibits disparagement or criticism of the company for risk-related concerns, nor retaliate for risk-related criticism by hindering any vested economic benefit. That is a direct statement to OpenAI. This is exactly what OpenAI had in their documentation upon an employee leaving the company. But they did recently say they're going to waive all of it. And so they are getting better, but this letter really directly addresses the entire industry. If we want to say something after we leave a company about the risk profile of the company with respect to AI, we should be able to do that. And I agree, they should be able to. Now, obviously, they shouldn't be able to share trade secrets. And that makes a lot of sense because these trade secrets are incredibly valuable and they could just go to another company, although that happens anyways. But the fact that they can't criticize the company's risk related activities doesn't make sense to me. Okay, next, that the company will facilitate a verifiably anonymous process for current and former employees to raise risk-related concerns to the company's board, to regulators, and to an appropriate independent organization with relevant experience. I mean, yeah, that's great. I don't know if companies are going to agree to that, though. That's basically asking them to invest their resources into something that they're going to view as harming them. I don't agree with that, by the way, but whether they're going to be willing to do it is something else. I think number one is probably much more likely. Next, that the company will support a culture of open criticism and allow its current and former employees to raise risk-related concerns about its technologies to the public, to the company's board, to regulators, or to an appropriate independent organization with relevant experience, so long as trade secrets and other intellectual property interests are appropriately protected. This is good, but this seems just very hand-wavy to me. There's no way to actually measure or enforce this. And even if they said, yeah, we're going to allow it, the culture can still be if somebody goes out and criticizes the AI safety of, let's say, OpenAI, in the subconscious of each employee, the manager, the board, the directors, they're still going to know that this person went behind their backs and did something that kind of hurt the company, and they're going to think negatively about that person. So this is a pretty weak point in my mind, although I agree with it in principle. Next and last, that the company will not retaliate against current and former employees who publicly share risk-related confidential information after other processes have failed. And then it continues, we accept that any effort to report risk-related concerns should avoid releasing confidential information unnecessarily. Therefore, once an adequate process for anonymously raising concerns to the company's board, to regulators, and to an appropriate independent organization with relevant expertise exists, we accept that concerns should be raised through such a process initially. However, as long as such a process does not exist, current and former employees should retain their freedom to report their concerns to the public. Most of these sound exactly the same to me. And again, in principle, I agree. I'm not sure how they're going to get these companies to agree with it. The only one that is kind of cut and dry, very obvious and very easy, is that the company will not enter into or enforce any agreement that prohibits disparagement for risk-related concerns. That one seems obvious. Companies should do that. It doesn't really cost them anything. There is a kind of level of commitment to safety that a company is going to have to take, but that's a good thing. And now we have the people who signed. We have Jacob Hilton, formerly OpenAI. That's one name that I recognize. William Saunders, I recognize, formerly OpenAI, and a bunch of former and current OpenAI anonymous employees. We also have Yoshua Ben-Gio, who, as we see here, Canadian computer scientist, most noted for his work on artificial neural networks, and so very, very prominent in the AI research field. We have Geoffrey Hinton, who is also known as the godfather of AI, a British-Canadian computer scientist, and Stuart Russell, who is another British computer scientist. So these are all very well-versed, well-experienced people to be talking about this subject. So that came out on June 4th, which as of recording was yesterday. All right, now we have Leopold Aschenbrenner, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, who just did an interview on Dwarkesh's podcast where he talks about a bunch of things, including a $1 trillion cluster, scaling AGI, the CCP espionage, leaving OpenAI and starting an AGI investment firm, dangers of outsourcing clusters to the Middle East, and so on. Here is his LinkedIn profile: Columbia University valedictorian, worked at OpenAI for just about a year and a half. And he left because of AI safety concerns as well. And he actually wrote a pretty in-depth paper about AI, AGI, AI safety, etc. And so I'll touch on a couple things from this. So over the past year, the talk of the town, and they're talking about San Francisco, the cradle of innovation at this point, the talk of the town has shifted from $10 billion compute clusters to $100 billion to $1 trillion compute clusters. Every 6 months, another zero is added. So he's talking about the scaling now. By the end of the decade, American electricity production will have grown tens of percent. From the shale fields of Pennsylvania to the solar farms of Nevada, hundreds of millions of GPUs will hum. And the AGI race has begun. He says by 2025, 2026, these machines will outpace many college graduates. By the end of the decade, they will be smarter than you or I. We will have superintelligence. He is saying By the end of this decade, we will have AGI. Along the way, national security forces not seen in half a century will be unleashed, and before long, the project we will be on. If we're lucky, we'll be in an all-out race with the CCP, so that's China's government. If we're unlucky, an all-out war. So he seems to be extremely concerned with CCP and their espionage of US AI labs, and the CCP has been known to use espionage against US corporations, so I don't think his concern is unwarranted. Here he goes on to say, NVIDIA analysts still think 2024 might be close to the peak. Mainstream pundits are stuck on the willful blindness of it's just predicting the next word. Okay, so that's how transformers work currently. They see only hype and business as usual. At most, they entertain another internet-scale technological change. Before long, the world will wake up, but right now, there are perhaps a few hundred people, most of them in San Francisco and the AI labs, that have situational awareness. So basically an awareness of what's coming. And if you're watching these videos, you probably have an idea as well. So I'm just going to touch on the summaries of his very deep paper, but I recommend you read it in depth. You can find it at situational-awareness.ai. And let's just go over what this very, very smart person in AI thinks. So from GPT-4 to AGI, counting the OOMs, orders of magnitude. AGI by 2027 is strikingly plausible. GPT-2 to GPT-4 took us from preschooler to smart high schooler abilities in 4 years. True. Tracing trend lines in compute, 0.4 orders of magnitude per year, algorithmic efficiencies, and unhobbling gains from chatbot to agent, we should expect another preschooler to high schooler size qualitative jump by 2027. And here we can see the increase in performance for different tests against AI. And as we can see, so back in 1998, it took a long time to have these little increases, but then all of a sudden, starting at the end of the 2010s and especially accelerating into the last couple years, we're seeing basically vertical lines, increases that are tremendous. And then he goes on to say, from AGI to superintelligence, the intelligence explosion. AI progress won't stop at human level. Hundreds of millions of AGIs could automate AI research, compressing a decade of algorithmic process into less than a year. We would rapidly go from human level to vastly superhuman AI systems. The power and the peril of superintelligence would be dramatic. So he is saying beyond AGI, we're going to have superintelligent systems, potentially hundreds or thousands of them, that are doing the AI research themselves, compounding the output of that research, compounding the intelligence that they have. And then he goes on to talk about the race to $1 trillion cluster. And we know that there was rumors Sam Altman is raising $7 trillion for a cluster himself. So the most extraordinary techno-capital acceleration has been set in motion. As AI revenue grows rapidly, many trillions of dollars will go into GPU, data center, and power build-out before the end of the decade. The industrial mobilization, including growing U.S. electricity production by tens of percent, will be intense. Lock down the lab, security for AGI. The nation's leading AI labs treat security as an afterthought. Currently, they're basically handing the key secrets for AGI to the CCP on a silver platter. Securing the AGI secrets and weights against the state actor threat will be an immense effort, and we're not on track. So reading this, if I understand correctly, he does believe in closed source. He wants to lock down the weights. He doesn't want to share them openly. He thinks that they are too valuable and too dangerous. Next, super alignment. Reliably controlling AI systems much smarter than we are is an unsolved technical problem. And while it is a solvable problem, okay, so that's very hopeful. He thinks it's solvable. Things could easily go off the rails during a rapid intelligence explosion, which we are having right now. Managing this will be extremely tense. Failure could easily be catastrophic. So he is definitely in the category of AI doomer, but he has hope that we can achieve it, just not on the path we're on right now. Okay, so I'm going to skip over the rest of these sections, and I want to go on to another person who just left OpenAI. This is Daniel Kokotallo. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And he just resigned from OpenAI. He just posted this on June 4th. And this is after OpenAI said they're going to release all ex-employees from that disparagement clause. So let's read it. Here is a tweet. In April, I resigned from OpenAI after losing confidence that the company would behave responsibly in its attempt to build artificial general intelligence, AI systems that are generally smarter than humans. I joined with the hope that we would invest much much more in safety research as our systems became more scalable, but OpenAI never made this pivot. People started resigning when they realized this. I was not the first or last to do so. Another is Jan, who was the head of Superalignment. He explicitly said, I was promised, I think he said 20% of compute resources for superalignment research, and they were not given it. When I left, I was asked to sign paperwork with a non-disparagement clause that would stop me from saying anything critical of the company. We already know about that now. It was clear from the paperwork and my communications with OpenAI that I would lose my vested equity in 60 days if I refused to sign. Some documents and emails visible here, and actually I made a video about this. Part 5, my wife and I thought hard about it and decided that my freedom to speak up in the future was more important than the equity. I told OpenAI that I could not sign because I did not think the policy was ethical. They accepted my decision and we parted ways. That's really nice of them to do. They basically didn't have to pay out, but they also did not get that signature. But at this point, I think it doesn't matter. He's still, I believe, should get his vested equity. Next, the systems that labs like OpenAI are building have the capacity to do enormous good, but if we are not careful, they can be destabilizing in the short term and catastrophic in the long term. These systems are not ordinary software. They are artificial neural nets that learn from massive amounts of data. There is a rapidly growing scientific literature on interpretability, alignment, and control, but these fields are still in their infancy. And I mentioned in a previous video that I am going to do a video about interpretability, which I find to be fascinating, and Anthropic AI just published a paper about interpretability and how they are starting to see that it is possible. And basically, by the way, what that means is traditionally AI is like a black box. The algorithm is a black box. You put in an input, something happens, and you get the output. And what we want to be able to do is see into that black box to understand, okay, why did this input result in this output? Which nodes within the AI system were activated as part of that process, and we don't have a good understanding of that today. Next, there is a lot we don't understand about how these systems work and whether they will remain aligned to human interests as they get smarter and possibly surpass human-level intelligence in all arenas. Meanwhile, there is little to no oversight over this technology. Instead, we rely on the companies building them to self-govern, even as profit motives and excitement about the technology push them to move fast and break things. So if you're not familiar with that statement, move fast and break things, that is from Facebook in the very early days. That was plastered everywhere. That was their internal motto, move fast, break things. But that no longer works. And actually, that doesn't work in a lot of industries. Healthcare, for example, you don't want to move fast and break things. Otherwise, you get something like Theranos, where they moved fast, broke things, and put people's lives at risk. Silencing researchers and making them afraid of retaliation is dangerous when we are currently some of the only people in a position to warn the public. Agreed. I applaud OpenAI for promising to change these policies. Yes. It's concerning that they engaged in these intimidation tactics for so long and only course corrected under public pressure. Why does anybody ever course correct, especially a company? Yeah, it's because you got caught. It's also concerning that leaders who signed off on these policies claim they didn't know about them. That is surprising. We owe it to the public, who will bear the brunt of these dangers, to do better than this. Reasonable minds can disagree about whether AGI will happen soon, but it is foolish to put so few resources into preparing. Then he goes on to talk about right-to-warn.ai, which I just reviewed at the beginning of this video. And then Elon Musk with his amazing single exclamation mark reply. Next, I want to go back to situationalawareness.ai. Remember, this is Leopold, former OpenAI employee, and he has this really interesting chart right here. So he has on the left AGI and a few different categories for safety, and then superintelligence, which is beyond AGI. So required alignment technique, we know AGI, RLHF, reinforcement learning through human feedback, ++. But for superintelligence, it is novel, qualitatively different technical solutions that we don't know yet. What happens if we fail with AGI? The stakes are low. What happens if we fail with superintelligence? Catastrophic. Architecture and algorithms, familiar descendants of current systems, fairly benign safety properties. For superintelligence, architecture alien, designed by previous generations, super smart AI systems. So AI designing AI to the point where it is so alien to us that we basically don't know what's going on. And I've actually talked about something similar in a different context, and that's programming. I am a big believer that in 10 years, we're not going to need developers this anymore. And there's a few reasons for that, but one is code as it looks today only looks that way because humans are really bad at programming. And so it has to look like that. It has to look as much like natural language as possible. However, in the future, if AI is writing all the code and eventually we're going to have large language models computing directly on end devices, then all of a sudden it doesn't need to look like natural language at all. In fact, it could just be symbols, or it could be something we can't even imagine. So there's a lot to think about there, but it's kind of the same thing. If AI is designing a system, it could look like nothing we've seen before, and we just might not understand what we're looking at. Backdrop world is normal and superintelligence world is crazy. Okay. And then last, our ability to understand it, AGI, we can understand what the systems are doing, how they work, and whether they're aligned. We're not quite there. I think he's talking about in the future. And then for superintelligence, we have no ability to understand what's going on, how to tell if systems are still aligned and benign, what the systems are doing, and we are entirely reliant on trusting the AI systems. Transition in less than a year with very little time to get decisions right. His timeline seems very short in my mind, but what do you think? Let me know in the comments. But I do agree that we're going to get to this point where we no longer have the ability to just understand what's going on under the hood in the black box. And at that point, we do have to just trust AI, and that does not seem good to me. I think we need to be able to always trust but verify. Trust but verify. So that's all I'm going to cover from situational awareness today. But if you want to see me do a full video all about every section in here, let me know. It is quite complex at times and there's a lot of meat on these bones. Yeah, let me know in the comments. I'm happy to really do a deep dive, take a bunch of notes, and try to convey it as I understand it. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.